Hello, and thanks for reviewing the following presentation given during the 2020 Data Science Symposium webinar series. The Data Science Symposium is one of several services provided by the University of Cincinnati's Center for Business Analytics, a part of the Lindner College of Business. Through leadership forums, student projects, public education events, including the Data Science Symposium and the Analytics Summit this spring, as well as professional development courses, the Center provides businesses and organizations with game-changing capabilities to drive analytics for competitive advantage, regardless of size or type of organization you represent. For more information about the Center, including how to join our 25 member organizations and the benefits they enjoy, please contact either myself or Dr. Michael Fry here at UC. Now, enjoy the following presentation.
Welcome to the audience again, and welcome to the panelists. I thought rather than reading out the bios of my panelists, I would ask them to perhaps give it a personal history to how they became a chief information officer or a chief data analytics officer. And in particular, I'm interested in the moment that they realized there had been a fundamental transformation in how we thought of as the power of data to transform business. So Jude, you began, so why don't you begin here today as well?
Yeah, great, thanks, Jason. You know, I think for me, it really culminated, this is a while ago, so think about the first iPhones that came out. What was that, 2009? I can't remember, was that the year they came out? And I got asked to lead an effort to understand how these things could help a services division of my old company. And so we went through and just started to realize the power of putting information in the hands of a customer so that if they were in a maintenance event or they were in any type of issue, the power to get in touch with them, the power to connect them was literally held in the palm of your hand. And then that really started to spring a whole new practice of physics-based data science at the company. I wasn't responsible for that, obviously. I was just a guy that was a part of the team. But for me, it helped me realize a couple of things. One was the world's going to change, and it's going to change faster than we're ever going to be able to keep up with. And I don't think that's a question. I think that's a fact. And two, the power of information when used right is going to change the way businesses function, the way people just live their lives. And so that became pretty apparent to me pretty quickly back in 2009. It's been something I've just seen go crazy ever since.
Thanks, Jude. And Craig, your job title didn't even exist, arguably, at least as a chief senior position in a company. How did you find your way to your current post?
You know, Jason, it's an interesting question, and the level set a little bit. It's probably very typical of what was happening in corporations across the world. Is in the late 2000s, we were all dealing with this thing called the worldwide global recession. 2008, 9, 10 started to kick around, and I was at Caterpillar, and I was working in the finance organization. They knew me from my background working in supply chain and some, what would you call analytics projects, and they said, Craig, we have this fledgling analytics group sitting underneath the CTO, and I won't use the exact words that the CTO said, but this group makes the organization really frustrated because they work on projects a little bit, they're extremely disruptive, and then they jump to the next thing. Can you help turn it into a professional organization that serves the business? And during that frame is about the same time the CEO started to understand customer data and how I'd say intermediaries were coming into Caterpillar and telling our customers more about our equipment than maybe we were. And it started a spur in this growth back from the recession. And I think other companies felt the same, that said, this is real. The power of this is tremendous. And we started to really build out the team as a strategic pillar for where Caterpillar was headed for the next 10 years.
That sounds like a very visionary CEO. Often the problem that many data analytics professionals have is convincing the CEO that this needs to be a strategic part of their organization. Carlos, were you as lucky with your CEOs? How did you become all the things that you've done over the years?
I consider myself very, very lucky, but my path is a little bit unique. I I joined Procter & Gamble, many years ago out of Georgia Tech. But I was in Georgia Tech, and I was asked to go to my home country, to Peru, to start there. So I was supposed to start in finance because I had an MBA, engineer with an MBA, and started in IT, for whatever reasons, until I was going to jump into finance, because IT reported into finance in those days. Well, short story, I became the IT leader for the subsidiary, and they gave me a training and broadening assignment in the US, and that's my first time in Cincinnati in 1993, early 1993. So I said, great, I'm going to learn a lot about IT. I said, no, my assignment was a special assignment as a business analyst in the hair care business, US business, and I was supposed to learn, about analytics and serve the business. So I did some of that, and as I did that, I was given the responsibility to manage the analytics program for beauty care and healthcare in the US. Okay, so that's how I got started with analytics. And then, after that, I went back to Latin America, and I thought I was going to do analytics for Latin America, and they changed me all over again. No, you're going to do, technology projects, SAP and things like that. So until I came back to the US in 2000, I didn't touch analytics. But as CIO of food and beverage, we had a program, of business analysis, and we had some, supply chain, analytics as well, which Glenn was involved in some of the projects of that. So I understood enough about analytics, so I became a big sponsor of that. And through my career, I grew, and then I went to Hershey, where the CEO who hired me looked at me and said, you know what? Hershey is, in my view, is a knowledge company. We just happen to make chocolate. So when I got hired, I had to try to live to that expectation.
It strikes me that you all three have very different paths to the same kind of position, but in each case, you were fortunate enough to work within organizations that knew they were, in Carlos's phrase, knowledge institutions. I'm going to talk to you guys for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll take some questions from the floor. Jude, can I begin with you again? You said something stunning to me during your presentation that I thought represented a real challenge. You said that the customers of Third Bank essentially expect a customer experience on par with the digital experiences that they receive at other companies. That seems like a really tall order, that a bank should provide the same level of personalization and smoothness that customers have learned to expect from Amazon. How can you possibly live up to that kind of expectation when that isn't your specialization, your bank?
That's a good question. I think for us, it's about putting, data and analytics and putting digital at the center of what the company's future is going to look like. And that's what we're doing. You've got to invest your money, your people, and your resources in creating the competencies within our organization to be able to deliver that type of an experience. And to be quite honest with you, it's a challenge, right? And I give a lot of credit to the big digital companies of this world that have really set a bar very, very, very high on that. And to be quite frank, we partner with them, right? If you think about, Amazon, they're one of our cloud providers. And so that it's blurring the lines so much. And what we have to understand is what role can we play in creating those experiences, and how can we invest appropriately in talent and in technology to do that? And then where do we have to partner to make it as seamless as we can with those other companies?
Do you find the competition for talent extremely challenging? And how do you work around that?
Yeah, it is. And for us, there's a couple things. We do a lot with the University of Cincinnati because there's a lot of great talent coming out of the local universities all over this country. Me happening to be here is a great chance for us to tap into what Glenn and the team and all the universities have done. We're up in their innovation center with Procter & Gamble and with, other big Cincinnati companies. That's one way. And then I think the other one is, you've got to work really well with your local markets and understand where you can play. Cincinnati is not a tech hub per se nationally. So do we have to expand in different regions? We have a footprint, a national footprint now. Do we have to build tech centers in different parts of the country where we can have better access to it? So those are areas where we're going to be exploring is can we do that? And what we do have here, we want to try to attract and be a part of. So it's really a three-pronged approach when you think about it. It's experience hires from multi-city, it's the universities, and then it's really growing what you got internally and enabling and empowering those people to do it.
Thank you. Craig, you work at a very big, complex organization with an unusual economic structure of licensed stores and licensees. I'd like to hear how you manage the personnel challenge of convincing management, the restaurants themselves, the people who work in them, and customers themselves that data and data analytics can be not just a core part of the business, but a false multiplying effect for all their efforts.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and just to riff a little bit from what Jude said is the good news for many of us as practitioners and leaders in the space is the buy-in and support and engagement is probably a little bit easier now than it was 2-3 years ago, when we were actually, maybe the systems weren't as well integrated and clunky, but now we're seeing that expectation is raising, not only from, I'd say non-analytics leaders having their experience with their cell phones, but the consumers having that same expectation of when I order on a McDonald's app and it's integrated with Lyft, Uber Eats, Postmates, etc., it should all feel the same. So the expectation is raised to the part where the resistance issues that were internal aren't quite so much when they're consumer facing, but they still do exist on business process. And with that, it's a lot of times showing them how this is enabling to their business, but also looking outside the company and showing them what other people are doing in the same space to keep some competitive threat, and showing them and demonstrating where your industries, where your peers, and where your non-industry peers are going with this.
So the benefit with the customer experience is clear. Can you give me an example of a internal resistance to improving a business process that once people got it, they said, oh yeah, that's going to make my life much better and increase profits, but it was difficult to explain until they'd experienced it?
Yeah, I'll take an extremely simple one that probably exists in every business in the world. Is all of our favorites, time and expense reports. You say, everyone has to do them. They're a pain. We can simplify the process by automating it a lot with some robotics and some anomaly detections. But we can also completely eliminate the process if we really want to, because those rules are set up at front. Why do I need to do approvals at all? Because the approvals will come when the funds are shown right there at point of sale or at activity, whether or not that's an authorized use of that account or card. You can completely eliminate the entire T&E process. And while that for every employee, that's a beautiful thing, for the audits and the controllers in the world, it's a, hey, well, wait a minute, you've completely, maybe eliminated my entire organization with artificial intelligence internally. And so the resistance issues to go through and show every check and balance is often sometimes crawl, walk, run, that the first thing I may have to do is simplify the process for them so they see it's their benefit, and then take them to a full elimination at times, just because of the change in the resistance issues that exist inside a business.
Thank you. Carlos, what is the greatest unrecognized business opportunity for data science and data analytics inside organizations at the moment? What aren't people doing?
Well, there's two sides to the question, I think. One is, why is so difficult to apply this in the business? And I would argue that it's probably, there's a few angles to it. It's difficult in a business because what you already said, talent. Okay, data science talent is scarce in corporations in general. So anybody that has a little knowledge becomes an expert, and that's a very dangerous thing, because then whatever you do, it doesn't reflect reality, and it doesn't, live to the expectations. And once you have a bad flavor on that, then your CEO, your C-suite would say, let's not invest on that. The other thing is you go with consulting firms, and consulting firms have always shiny things, but they don't have the depth either. They have a few bright spots, but they don't have the depth. So that disappoints, that experience disappoints, and you fire them. The other one, the second point is that in corporate world, most of the work is short-term, very short-term. So there's little patience to build long-term programs. And analytics is a long-term program that you have to build from a talent, technology, and business processes. The corporation wants answers to be provided now, right now, okay? And they want to know, management wants to understand the why, but they don't have the background nor the patience to learn and train to get the background to understand the why, but they still want to know the why. So it's like explaining the time series from young to a CEO, right? In 2 minutes, elevator conversation. And the last one is culture.
Yeah.
Third one is culture, in my view. Data science is viewed as academic inside many corporations. They only want the good. They don't want the perfect. Perfect is for academia. We want just the good. Okay, we want simple statistics. Okay, so they don't hire PhDs. Only they hire them for product research, but not for running or advising the business. So there's little tolerance to experimentation, including some failure that you need to have for the purpose of learning. So that's for me the hard side. Now, from an opportunity, there's tons of opportunities on, micro customizing your offering to the needs of the consumer individually. Even if you are a mass marketing company or a mass production company, you can still do mass customization if you know what to customize in, and provide to your customers. So for me, that's the biggest opportunity in corporation like the ones we're talking about.
Jude, let's do the same thing with you. In addition to the challenges we talked about with talent, what is the largest challenge you see in your daily working life? And what's the most unexplored opportunity that you would love to spend the next 5 years working on?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, for me, the biggest challenge probably is the fact that, and I don't think I'm unique in this, a lot of the data, we're a 100-plus-year-old company, right? We have a lot of information. And sorting out and finding it, because it's siloed in this system. I've got 1,000 IT systems that contain data, within the bank alone. Finding the right data to drive really good insights through analytics is the first biggest challenge, because I've just got data everywhere, and getting it architected into a place where it's very usable is probably the biggest first pass of challenge. I think when you get it and you ask about, where are the untapped areas, where do you want to spend 5 years? I really do think it's truly, and I did this in my speech earlier, it's about that customer experience. I want to understand, how can I anticipate your needs and get you the things you need before you either know you need them or right at the point of when you do need them. In the old manufacturing world, I'd call it like just-in-time inventory, but it's with money and it's with, your digital experiences. How can I eliminate the need for you to find what you need resourcefully from your banking products and just get them to you literally right away? Why do we have to have credit scores? Why do we have to have all these things? I know enough about you. Why do I have to go through all that, right? Yeah. If you're my customer, why can't I just make it seamless, frictionless, and literally like that? And that's an underserved area, I think, is that we like the formality in my industry. We like the process, and it's great, but it's kind of a pain in the ass for our customers. And I'd like to eliminate that. And I think a lot of people are trying to do that. And that's where I think it's an opportunity.
You talked a bit about this in your speech, Jude, but can you give me an example either from Third or from a competitor about a banking service that really delights people? So you talk about eliminating friction, but something where that was a great experience.
But just a very simple example now is Apple Pay, right? Just use a really good, easy example everybody understand. You can walk up, You can use your phone. You can buy something, whether I'm backing your credit card or Amazon's backing your credit card or Citi's backing your credit card. It all happens right there, and it's seamless and it's real time, right? That's a pretty easy example for everybody to understand, where that's making banking a little easier than, running a card through a strip and signing everything and doing that stuff. It's just frictionless on the go. A lot of banks now are offering mortgages fully digital. We're doing it now. We've done 800 this year, just all online and all connected without you ever going into a branch or signing anything. So those are other examples where we're making a pretty tough process a lot easier to do.
Mm-hmm. And Craig, finally for you, challenges that you want to solve and a problem that an opportunity you would love to seize over the next 5 years. Craig, I think you're on mute. Sorry, there we go.
You are correct. I was on mute. So
Okay.
I think a couple of the big challenges are still ones that are in front of us. I mean, we can talk about the data stream still having an opportunity, taking vision systems and augmenting them with sound systems, vision systems with speech systems, vision with structured data. We still look at these typically almost linear as I pull a vision system analytics, or I pull a sound system analytics, or I pull a data stream from structured text. That we're still getting to phase 2. I think that technology will come. Where I see the continued challenge in the near set of years is still the feathering of business acumen with critical thinking and data sciences combined. And a little bit to what Carlos said before is where those three meet is where I've seen the greatest value take place, where I can bring business acumen into the team, I can bring data science out to the business, and those two working together to optimize solutions like things we were doing at Ford Motor with the manufacturing plant with 4,000 robots in a single plant. The data scientists have to know how that plant operates in order to bring good solutions that are valid. And at the same time, the folks on the line have to have a working and understanding of how AI works and machine learning works to start to bring in a conversation and a discussion between the two to unlock the value. And I still see those, that's still the biggest opportunity for the industry.
One last question before I take some questions from the audience. Yogi Berra, of course, famously said that predictions are hard, especially about the future. But I sometimes feel that the pandemic has been accelerating changes that were rippling through our society in any case. And things that we were postponing or thought we could defer, whether they were political or organizational, have suddenly become critical. So I would be interested to hear from your perspectives as CIOs and analytics officers, which changes do you think are going to be permanent in terms of consumer behavior and operational processes, and which things are temporary? Carlos, please.
Yeah, that is a great question because I saw a cartoon the other day where they had a digital transformation leader, and they had this drawing of the COVID virus. So that's your best business digital transformation leader. What would mean that the pandemic has driven transformation that before would take 3-4 years to go through. You had to turn everything, through video and virtual in a week's time. What normally in a corporation would take you a year at least, because you have to test, you have to get feedback, you have to make people feel comfortable. Here, forget it. Comfort or not, you're going to do this because there's no other way. So I think those things are here to stay, which then changes dramatically. It's a step change on how consumers behave and how people behave. No longer is a linear trend. We had that step change because of the pandemic. And I think we're going to be demanding a lot more from businesses from a digital perspective. As Jude was saying, I don't have any patience to have my mobile bank application to be below the standard that an Amazon or an Uber has, right? So everything has to be at the same level because I'm the consumer and I have all the applications, and for me, they all should behave similarly. I can't have the good and the bad, right? So it's going to put a lot of pressure in companies, I think, and that's going to stay. And then as well, I think it's a reprioritization of how you spend your life.
Yeah.
You know, people have realized that there is a lot of more life-work blend than life-work balance. The balance is way 2000. Blend is 2020. Okay, so you may work at night, you may go out during the day with your family. Who cares? You deliver your priorities. Is a blend, and that's going to stay. But it's all enabled by these digital technologies, and the pandemic, of course, will accelerate it.
Jude, what do you think the world will look like in January 22?
Wow, it's a good question. You know, I think, and I'll add on to something Carlos just said. You know, pre-pandemic, we ran about 10% of a remote workforce at the bank. We're running about 60 to 70% for the last 6 months. I think January 2022, we're still at 30 to 40% because I don't know that we're going to need to bring everybody back. We've learned that, you know, using good collaborative digital technologies can allow a lot of people to be very productive and maybe achieve a little more of that work-life blend that Carlos is mentioning. I think we're all starting to realize that, you know, there's some permanency that may not be all bad. And then, you know, how that changes the employee work relationship is going to be interesting to see with how you take time, how you take vacation. I think that's all going to evolve fairly quickly. I hope 2022 has a return to things like travel and leisure. I want to see the airlines bounce back. I want to see the hotels come back. I think people need to go do those things, and we're going to have to figure that out for sure in order to get some balance back into this world, because I think that's what I know me personally, but a lot of people are just missing some of that freedom to go do stuff, and we need to find a way to get some of that back.
Is Third actively discussing occupancy after?
You know, I think everybody is and has to, and I think we're going to be opportunistic where we can. I mean, right now, for example, with my tech organization, I'm 1,000 people and they're all still remote. And you know, how many of those we bring back versus make it, I always said, I'd rather have not, you know, there's the talk of, well, can you have 100% in, you know, 70% out, 30% in, and I'd rather have 100% of the people here 30% of the time. Right? Redesign workspaces for being able to have your folks come in for critical meetings, for trainings, for certain things to social interact. But if you're in Agile sprints and you're in that 2-week work environment, you can do that remote pretty easily, but you can do the retros and the planning together in person. You want to design your workspaces that way. It's pretty opportunistic.
And maybe this is going to be in some ways, you know, for all the tragedy, there will be some benefits as well. It will accelerate a more flexible work environment than we've been permitted before. And finally, Craig, what changes do you think are going to be permanent as we appear outside in January 22, particularly for the restaurant industry?
Yeah, particularly for a restaurant, I think what you're going to see in the near term is a much more higher expectation that I can deliver and my food will be ready when I get there. As you see a lot of right now, and you can see that the industry is moving that way right now, is you can order in advance, but tell me when you're there so I can drop your order. We're going to get much closer to actually picking it up and it's ready while you wait, especially for hot items. Cold drinks and such are easy to do that and let it sit for 10 minutes, not a problem. But if McDonald's specifically, you want those fries to be the last thing that goes in the bag, and you better make sure they're on-prem when you're doing it, or you're going to have unhappy customers from a result of digital. But I think in general, what you're going to see is where there were, I'll say, false rules about an in-person experience that were required. That's what you're going to see go away because people have less tolerance for it. For me personally, the medical clinic, you know, the last thing I ever wanted to do when I had a flu was go in where everybody was sick and listen to everyone cough around. And if I wasn't actually sick, well, maybe I am now. Telehealth, I think, is going to be completely upended. I have a daughter who's a physical therapist. She's doing PT through video. So I think that some of that will balance more, but you've seen it literally accelerate in, as was stated, a stepwise function change of what I'll call these false in-person experiences. Car salesman, everyone hates going to the car dealership. It's a known fact, right? Now suddenly all OEMs are selling cars online, will deliver them to your doorstep. I don't think
Tesla
that
was ahead of the Tesla was ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and I don't think that you'll see that. It'll go back a little bit, but I don't think that consumers will accept it being eliminated and saying, no, you have to come back to the old way of doing this. So I think I go these false requirements of an in-person experience where the consumer really didn't want it.
I know in my own life, I go into work for intensive meetings where collaboration is really necessary. And we go into the lab to monitor our experiments. But it turns out that much of what we thought had to be done in person really doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On that note, I'm going to call upon Glenn and Mike to take some of the questions from the audience, which I can see in my little chat box are beginning to proliferate. So Mike or Glenn, one of you.
Well. First and foremost, thanks so much, Jason, for leading a great panel here and some great topical questions here. One thing that I'm wondering about is I think back to Craig and building a little bit on Jude's earlier presentation is and this theme of how has this pandemic perhaps enabled new things. I have to imagine that data and analytics came to the front of the battle against the pandemic in terms of helping store managers make fundamental decisions about what they do in terms of being prepared. Was there anything in your organization that helped those managers prepare themselves for the day and on this high level of uncertainty at the beginning of the pandemic, and if so, what were they?
Clearly nobody had this in their goal or to-do list of plan to go after a global worldwide pandemic in their 2020 objectives or even business continuity plans. This is the once in 100 years thing. So I'd say while stores have an operations manual, they have a standard playbook, and they're built to go by the playbook. That thinking and approach advanced very quickly the willingness for them to adopt standard procedures and protocols across the chain, and they were looking for help very quickly on what do I do. So things such as closing down, in the example of McDonald's, the dining room, which is still closed down, very quickly advanced to focus on keeping our customers safe and doing what's right for our customers, while knowing our customers have a very low tolerance, even in these days, for inconvenience. So working through this process, but what it allowed us to do is focus more on the drive-through. And now the drive-through is faster than ever, more efficient than ever. But we did things in policy, and you'll see this in many industries, and talk to my friends in consumer products, it simplified the offering too. It actually, if you look at the menu at McDonald's, it's less than before. Breakfast isn't all day anymore. Some of the other more complex, we got back to our roots. And I heard that true in CPG with P&G and others, really getting back to their simplified products of what customers really wanted. So there's some hidden benefit and that unlocked a value chain for most companies, including McDonald's.
Excellent. Thank you. Mike, any questions we got queued up?
Yeah, we do. We've had a couple of questions come in. So this first one has to do, the question is about the effect of cloud computing, cloud storage on businesses. And maybe Jude, we can start with you, since you referenced a little bit about the importance of data security at Fifth Third Bank and how you have to think about that. So how does that work in your organization? Is cloud storage, cloud computing seen as perfectly acceptable in all areas, or are there differences between what can be done on-prem versus in the cloud?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of strategy around where data sits and how you move it around within banking, right? So there are approved cloud storage products that even Amazon offers that we utilize for storing information that's very, very specific and intentional, right? When you think about your normal everyday banking use of information, customer information, account information, that kind of stuff, we're still really protecting that data and keeping it on-prem. And right now, largely it's because there's a lot that goes into being confident of where that data goes, and how you're protecting it, or, you know, when it leaves your firewall. So for us, there's a lot of focus on what we're calling third-party data attestations and management. And now we're into fourth-party, right, type of data management. So we've got to set frameworks up around data controls and data movement, the ability to audit people that get to, you know, participate in some of that data sharing. And there's a lot of heavy lifting around that strategy, Mike. And I'd say we're in our very early days. We've got a few things up in Amazon, but for the most part, you know, the egress points and the data reach back is still critical to us to keep a lot of the most important and valuable data customers want us to protect within our firewalls, because it's just where we have to be at this point in kind of our journey. But it's gonna continue to grow and proliferate. We're building an entire organization just around how we think about data movement, data protection when it's in Amazon, or, you know, honestly, there's a lot of data going to the Workdays and, you know, the Salesforce.com. So it's not just about putting your data in the cloud, it's about all your partners and technology products that are themselves, you know, in the cloud, whether they're at Amazon or they're in their own hosted cloud. So there's just a lot of complexity that we're working through. And the number one thing is to do it right and to be protective of the data. So we're going to take a very cautious approach as a bank to that.
Thanks, Jude. So Craig, actually, I think you made the comment that the French fries have to be done when the customer is on-prem, which I think is the first time I've ever heard on-prem used in a context like that. But I would throw the same question to you. Is it seen differently at McDonald's, where the data is a little bit different than Jude at a financial institution in terms of what you think about what's acceptable in the cloud, what's not?
You know, the good news is McDonald's been on a move to cloud for the last set of years. As this took place, for example, my data analytics team and all my lakes are all in the cloud today. But it allowed us to spin up very quickly to the access to increased need for mobile demands and such through the cloud. So it did help quite a bit. We're always being really cautious with regards to appropriate use and to customer privacy, I'd say to very, very extreme level beyond what the regulations put, to be cautious with regards to use more than location with regards to data. But I will say that a lot of the web applications and the online cloud applications as well, like Zoom and virtual meetings, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, it has definitely pushed that forward too in terms of how businesses operate internally.
Thanks. So I know we're getting towards the end here. So Carlos, if it's okay with you, I'm going to throw a different question at you. You had mentioned about the difficulty of finding data science talent, right? And we've had some questions come in related to that. So just curious on your point of view, given that data science talent is so scarce, how do you feel about where is it best to find that within an existing resource within your organization, and what needs to be done to retrain folks to be that resource that you need for data science and analytics?
Well, first, if you don't have any, you have to go and attract some and recruit some. So at Hershey, we did that. We created an organization. We brought some PhDs. We went to, we had a partnership with about 3 universities only, small, relatively small company, you know, $8 billion, not the 80 from P&G. So we can't go to every university, but we went to, you know, Carnegie Mellon, to their program, to UPenn. We got some people from Georgia Tech because I'm an alum from there. And we formed a nucleus. And from there, we started training some others, you know, as business analysts, not necessarily hardcore data scientists. You know, so the approach was to put this talent, PhDs, you know, in the business in different areas, so they can experience the challenges and build the hypothesis on what they need to do to solve a specific problem, right? And we got advice we worked with companies like Palantir, you know, very early on when they were working with nobody but only government, and we worked with a few others as well. And we start building models in R, start doing, you know, some shiny, you know, interface. And then upon making them work, we brought them to IT to build them for scale. So we can provide that with a much better Tableau or Power BI interface, in Python, more efficient, and we serve the masses, and that's how we train people on the art of analytics, right? But it started with a kernel of few PhDs, planted in key areas of the business to tackle some specific problems, like we talked about cocoa yield in West Africa, where we buy our cocoa beans. You need to know what the yield is every year because that affects prices. How you forecast that, how you predict, and you prescribe actions to that. So we build models around that. So that's in a nutshell what we did.
Thanks, Carlos. So I think we could have an interesting discussion for another hour with this panel, but unfortunately we're coming to the close of our time here. So I just want to thank Jason, thank all of our panelists for participating today.